December 2001, Enron Corporation, once the seventh largest company in the United States, filed for bankruptcy. In a single morning, 20,000 people lost their jobs. Employee retirement accounts, some holding life savings accumulated over decades, were wiped out almost entirely. The stock that had traded at $90 just a year before closed that day at less than $1. It was the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history, and almost nobody saw it coming. It began not with fraud, but with a vision. Kenneth Lay founded Enron in 1985 through the merger of two natural gas pipeline companies, Houston Natural Gas and Internorth. The timing was almost perfect. The Reagan administration had spent years pushing energy deregulation, dismantling the old regulatory framework that had kept gas prices fixed and predictable. Suddenly, natural gas could be bought and sold like any other commodity on the open market. Lay saw this not as chaos, but as opportunity. Enron's original business was simple: move gas through pipes, charge a fee. But Lay wanted something bigger. He wanted Enron to be the company that didn't just transport energy, that traded it, priced it, and ultimately controlled it. To do that, he needed a different kind of executive. In 1990, he hired Jeff Skilling, a McKinsey consultant who had an almost evangelical belief in the power of free markets and financial engineering. Skilling was brilliant, abrasive, and utterly convinced that the old rules didn't apply to Enron. Under his influence, the company began its transformation from a pipeline operator into something it called a gas bank, an intermediary that would connect buyers and sellers of natural gas, locking in long-term contracts and profiting from the spread. Revenues grew. The Wall Street analysts loved the story, and the story kept getting bigger. By the mid-1990s, Enron had moved far beyond natural gas. It was trading electricity, coal, steel, paper, internet bandwidth, anything that could be commoditized and priced. It opened trading operations in Europe. It launched Enron Online, a digital trading platform that, at its peak, was processing roughly $2.5 billion in transactions every single day. Fortune magazine named it America's most innovative company for 6 consecutive years, from 1996 through 2001. Its market capitalization hit $70 billion in the summer of 2000. Employees wore that success like a badge. The headquarters in Houston was sleek, modern, humming with the energy of people who genuinely believed they were smarter than everyone else in the room. And then there was the accounting. In 1992, Skilling convinced the Securities and Exchange Commission to allow Enron to use mark-to-market accounting, a method originally designed for financial institutions that allowed companies to book the estimated future profits of a long-term contract the moment the contract was signed. Not when the cash arrived, not when the project was delivered. The moment the ink dried, it was a profound shift. If Enron signed a 20-year energy contract and estimated it would generate $500 million profit, all $500 million could appear on the books that quarter. Revenue that hadn't been earned from projects that hadn't been built showed up as real income. The system worked as long as the projections held and the stock kept climbing. Skilling made sure both appeared to be true. The culture inside Enron reflected the pressure to perform at any cost. Skilling introduced a performance review system internally known as Rank and Yank. Each year, the bottom 15% of employees were fired, regardless of absolute performance. Analysts, traders, and executives competed not just to succeed, but to be seen succeeding. Failure was not tolerated. Questioning the numbers was not welcome. The people who rose were the ones who never blinked. Andy Fastow, Enron's chief financial officer, became the architect of what came next. He created hundreds of off-balance sheet entities, special-purpose vehicles with names like LJM Cayman and Raptor that existed primarily to absorb Enron's failing investments and hide them from the public financial statements. Fastow personally profited over $30 million from managing these entities. The complexity was so dense, so deliberately layered, that even sophisticated investors and analysts couldn't see through it. By 2001, the cracks were showing, but only from the inside. In August of that year, Sharon Watkins, a vice president at Enron, wrote a 7-page memo directly to Kenneth Lay. She warned him plainly, Enron could implode in a wave of accounting scandals. She described the Raptor structures in detail. She said she was concerned that she might be working for a company engaged in massive fraud. Lay handed the memo to Enron's own lawyers, who had significant financial relationships with the company. They found nothing to be concerned about. The memo was buried. That same month, Skilling abruptly resigned as CEO, citing personal reasons. It was the first visible signal that something was genuinely wrong, and investors began to notice. The stock started sliding. In October 2001, Enron reported a $618 million third-quarter loss and disclosed a $1.2 billion reduction in shareholder equity tied to the Fastow partnerships. The SEC opened a formal investigation. Within weeks, Arthur Andersen, Enron's auditing firm, began shredding documents, tons of paper, entire filing cabinets, backup tapes. The destruction was so extensive that it later resulted in criminal obstruction of justice charges against the firm, ultimately destroying one of the 5 largest accounting organizations in the world. Meanwhile, the executives who knew were moving fast. Between 2000 and 2001, Lay, Skilling, Fastow, and dozens of other insiders sold hundreds of millions of dollars in Enron stock. Ken Lay alone sold over $100 million in shares during this period. At the same time, Enron's 401k plan, the retirement savings of thousands of employees, was locked down during an administrative transition, preventing workers from selling their Enron shares as the price collapsed. Some employees lost everything. A pipeline worker named Charles Prestwood lost $1.3 million in retirement savings. He was 63 years old. He went back to work. The men who ran the company into the ground walked away with fortunes. Fastow was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Skilling received 24 years, later reduced to 14. Kenneth Lay was convicted on all 6 counts of fraud and conspiracy, but died of a heart attack in July 2006 before he could be sentenced. What Enron actually teaches us is not simply that greed is dangerous, though it is. The deeper lesson is about complexity as a weapon. Enron's fraud survived as long as it did not, because it was hidden in a dark room. It was hidden in plain sight, inside financial statements so complicated that no analyst, no journalist, no regulator felt equipped to challenge them. The company actively cultivated an image of being too sophisticated to understand and therefore too sophisticated to question. "We're the smartest guys in the room" was not just a belief, it was a defense mechanism. When complexity becomes a shield against accountability, when the people asking questions are made to feel foolish for asking, that is precisely when you should ask louder. Enron also exposed the catastrophic failure of gatekeepers, auditors, lawyers, analysts, board members who chose comfort and fees over their core function. The system that was supposed to prevent exactly this kind of fraud failed at every level simultaneously. The lesson is systemic, not just personal. If you found this story fascinating, you'll love what we have coming next. Subscribe so you don't miss it, because on this channel, a new empire falls every week.